Hello, everyone. Thanks for joining, and welcome to another session of our Day One and Beyond series, where we take you through various topics and activities related to building solutions on Oracle Cloud. My name is Joey, and I'll be your host for today's session. And this will be the seventh session of our series on the Oracle Analytics Cloud Platform, or OAC. This overall series is designed to help you unlock the full potential of OAC and transform your data into actionable insights. And then to lead us through today's webinar, I'm honored to introduce our featured speakers, Uma Kumar from our personalized training team, and Pete Medura as our analytics expert. And with that, I will hand it over to Uma.
Thanks, Joey. So, hi everyone. Like Joey mentioned, I'm a senior cloud engineer here at OCI. And today we will be discussing OAC administration. So, I'll give you guys a brief primer with some slides, and then we will have Pete go in and share his screen to take you through the demo of what we'll be covering today. So a brief agenda, I'm going to give an overview of Oracle Analytics Cloud for those who may not be familiar with it. This will be review if you've joined our previous seminars. And then we will dive into some important tools and features of OAC that administrators are typically going to be using. And then Pete will give, for the bulk of the session today, his demonstration. All right, so now let's jump into our overview or kind of review of Oracle Analytics Cloud. So OAC can be thought of as a comprehensive analytics platform. It provides you with capabilities for augmented, self-service, and governed analytics. The self-service, analytics portion deals with visualization and dashboarding, while the augmented analytics provides different AI capabilities like auto insights, natural language queries. And then lastly, we have our governed analytics section where you can scale and extend out to an enterprise level with different roles, take advantage of the different enterprise architecture and security. So that's kind of where we'll be mostly dealing with today when we think of what an administrator would do and the different tasks they would be performing. It will deal mostly with more governance of the tool. And then this slide is just going through a typical analytics workflow in a diagram. So you're starting off with a more technical task like connecting to your relevant data sources or modeling the physical sources into logical business views. Then that allows for the data prep and enrichment step. Next, we'll have the more business-centric tasks like exploring the data, making different insights, and creating visual stories and an overall experience, which you can then finally share through collaboration with your colleagues. So today, again, we're not going to be focused in a particular one since we are talking about administration, but when it comes to things like collaboration and user management, that is a topic that we'll be touching on. Okay, so now I'm just going to jump right into what you need to know to manage your Oracle Analytics Cloud instances and the platform itself as an administrator. The first thing is the OAC console. So this is an area of Oracle Analytics Cloud that allows administrators the ability to complete certain tasks. So you would use the console to manage different user permissions. You can use it to take snapshots, back up everyone's content. You can register safe domains, maybe configure your virus scanner, email server, deliveries, and more. You can also use it to diagnose issues with any of the SQL queries, again, from the console. So this is just a list of different options within the console that you can work with, like content management, that gives you like a bird's eye view of what's going on, snapshots, and etc. And Pete will be, again, delving into this much more in depth when we get to the demo portion. Next item that an administrator would typically be doing is kind of managing what other users are allowed to see when they're working with data. So some of these common tasks that they might be doing is things like adding different users and groups to the platform, understanding the different application roles and their permissions, maybe granting different permissions to these application roles. And then finally, adding the application roles to users and groups. So you can see some of the different types of application roles like BI Service Administrator, DB Content Author. So we'll again kind of go into that and you'll be able to see what the differences are between the roles and how the permissions fluctuate between them. On now, the next kind of option or task that we have is usage tracking. So usage tracking is going to help determine which user queries are creating performance bottlenecks based on the query frequency and response time. So you need to have an administrator privilege set up in OAC. Um, to have to be able to track these user queries and generate different usage reports. So you can use the usage report information to assist with things like database optimization, aggregation strategies, or just billing users and departments based off of the resources they consume. Essentially, what usage tracking is doing is just tracking every single query that is fired, understanding like what object it came from, how long it took, who did it, who fired it, and then being able to relate that back to any sort of operational type of changes that need to be made, like optimization, aggregation, so on and so forth. On the flip side of that, we also have OCI logging. So OCI logging, you can turn that on. Sorry, OAC logging. You can turn that on and then be able to get different audit files, audit log files. So essentially, with logging, it's going to capture certain data on all of these different log files. And there's two different types of log files you can access in the platform. There's the audit log files. That's going to log all the activities in Oracle Analytics Cloud, like, taking snapshots, security, maybe catalog objects. And then we also have the diagnostic logs. That's going to log information about like data export, data load, and query. So being familiar with both different types of logs and understanding where to access them will be very important to administrators using the platform. Something else that they could know is understanding the REST API support. So you can use an OCI Analytics API to manage the entire platform of OAC in your tenancy. Or you could also manage APIs at the instance level of OAC using the REST APIs for OAC. So these APIs will help you automate processes and programmatically access features and functionality in Oracle Analytics Cloud. And you'll see here on the screen kind of the differences between the two. We have like the OCI centric APIs and then the OAC specific APIs and what the differences are, like what different actions you can do with these. So this is just important to know from a administrator standpoint for anything like changes or things that you're making towards the platform. And with that, I will hand it to Pete to kind of take us through all of these different topics that we briefly outlined here. So Pete, whenever you're ready.
Great. Thank you so much, Uma. And good day, everyone. Thank you for attending our seventh installment of the series. For the next 40 minutes or so, I'll be covering all the topics that Uma just reviewed and hopefully a few more. Now, before we get going, I just kind of want to talk a little bit about like data governance and in the context of administration. So when I think about administration on any platform, I immediately think about all the available features that will allow me to monitor and control everything possible from users to objects to processes, along with any option that a user may have access to. Now, this is just one aspect of the overall data governance that organizations need to have a plan for when related to their data strategy. Now, based on my many years of administering OAC environments and training hundreds of customers on the basics, along with best practices, I'll be covering the features and tools that come up the most since we won't have enough time to go over every administrative option available to the platform. A few other things I just want to mention is that we'll be mostly focused on the DV or data visualization based admin features. And for a more comprehensive overview, please consider the courses on Oracle University. And if you don't have a subscription to the learning service, I strongly advise all administrators to take a few minutes to read through our online documentation, which will cover every option available. All right, and with that, let's get started. Here we are in the OAC home screen. I'm running on the July 2025 Enterprise Edition, and I'm logged in as an administrator. Now, as Uma said, we're going to start with the console today. And for some of you that have maybe not been upgraded to the July instance yet, might look a little bit different. They've made some tweaks to the navigation and some of the UIs. So don't be alarmed. You'll be seeing this very shortly when you get upgraded. So let's just start with the console. I figured that was the best place to start for everyone today. So you can see your slightly different experience here. We're going to go we still have the same menu items. We have the console, which we'll go into. Now, of course, as an administrator, you only get that console access if you are an administrator. But once you get access to here, you kind of get access to everything as administrator. Now, there are certain specialized custom application roles we're going to set up that can actually give some power users access to a little bit of this, and we're going to talk about that a little bit later. But right now, I'm just going to walk you through many of the features that I think are most important. We're just going to kind of go top to bottom, left to right, and I'll hit as many of these as I can. And with that, I think the best place to start off is content management. Now, content management has been around on the platform for a few years now, and it was, just such a great addition. Now, really, at the highest level, what is this used for? This is necessary for administrators to understand and have visibility to the objects in the system, and more importantly, to be able to get access to them. Because just because you're an administrator, you don't necessarily have access to every object. For example, if a user creates a new workbook and you don't have it set up that administrators get added to that object automatically upon creation, or the user that created it didn't explicitly add the administrator, you don't have access to it from the front end. But with the content management portal, you have access to everything. And really one of the first things you want to flip on here is this top left filter. This is going to allow you to basically filter the different object types that you're most concerned about, understanding, maybe just getting counts, see who has what. And so let's just go ahead and pick a few of them. I'm just going to pick some data sets. So here we have all the different data sets. You can search on different attributes up here in the top right on the data set. We have, of course, a couple different sorting features. You can search by owner right down here. So if I just type in my name, do a search, so immediately I'm going to get all the data sets that I am the owner of. And just to make sure everyone is aware, ownership is different than access, right? Every object can only have one owner, but every object can have multiple people able to access it. And of course, at different levels that we're going to talk about in a little bit. So again, ownership is all about one owner to each object. Now, above and beyond just going in here and seeing what people are doing, maybe seeing how many workbooks people are creating within here, I think the most powerful feature within here is the ability to change ownership, right? So I can come in here and I'm just going to click this one option and I'm going to say change ownership. Now I can assign this to me. We even have the button right here just to say, okay, so just going to insert the current user's name. I could select from other people, other administrators or other users within the platform that have been added. But this one, the few reasons and a few use cases I'll give you why you want to do this. Well, one, let's say an employee leaves, right? That's probably the most common use case. Someone leaves, maybe they leave the company, maybe they leave the department. Well, you want to be able to take back the ownership of those production objects that they've created or had a part in. And what you would want to do here is basically assign them to the next owner, or maybe even temporarily assign them to yourself. Now, that doesn't remove the permissions on the object. Remember, it's just changing the ownership. Now, a few other things that you might want to do is, let's say there is an object that was created that as an administrator, you don't have access to on the front end kind of through the catalog. Well, sometimes what I've had to do in these instances is I will temporarily take over ownership. And once you're the owner, you have full access to that object, which is the most important piece. So once you take ownership of an object, I can then add access to it. So maybe I add myself, or maybe I add all BI administrators to that object, and then I can give the ownership back to the original user, right? So those are really the use cases where I see this being used the most. And one of the things I just want to be aware of, you can multi-select, right? So you can come in here, I think there's a limit. I'm not sure the count, maybe 10, maybe more, but you can select all of these, change ownership, just say, okay, some of them are already mine. And then immediately you'll see this owner switch. And then you can come here and you can even see based on this one, you can see this one object right here. I can inspect it. But look, I don't even have that access panel is not here, right? Because as an administrator, I don't really have access to the object, but I could change the ownership to this, and then get the full access. And when I go to inspect it, and I can also remove it, delete it. And then of course, if I ever needed to, I could set it back to the original owner. So a very important feature within the platform. Hopefully most administrators are aware of it, but I just kind of want to show you some of the ins and outs and some of the use cases. So I'm definitely in here a lot. So I'm very happy that this is part of the platform. All right, let's go back. So kind of moving, we're going to talk about we're going to skip over that one. Next one, we're going to do roles and permissions. And I'm going to spend a little bit of time on this one. Always get a lot of questions on roles and permissions, and I'm going to hopefully just kind of like demystify it for everyone. So I'm going to click here. Now, the way this platform is designed, right? We have users that come into the platform. We have groups that come into the platform. There are system application roles, there are custom application roles, and then there are fine-grained permissions, right? That's pretty much everything we're working with when it comes to users and management of OAC. But let's actually step back and talk about how the structure works from a usability standpoint. So I'm just going to actually go home. I created a workbook for this webinar to kind of help us with that. So let's just talk about the framework of permissions, and then we'll go back and slowly add users, groups, custom application roles, and permissions into this. So if you were to look at our documentation, this is what you would see on how the roles of what you can do. Because remember, it's about what users can access and what they can do. Those are the two halves of the coin that you're dealing with in OAC. I have access to this, but I also can do this over here. So let's start on the bottom. On the bottom in that green are our two consumer roles. But if we start at BI consumer, that role, if you're given the BI consumer role, that means you have access to potentially view or consume classic dashboards and analysis. That's it. That's all you can do. Now, again, just because you have that role doesn't mean you can access every single dashboard in Classic. It just means if someone gives you permission, you have the capabilities to view the dashboards and interact with them. That's BI consumer. That is the lowest level system permission or system application role. Now, these are the main application roles, and they cannot be edited. That's where custom application roles come in. But moving up, we have DB consumer, right? That's for the data visualization side, similar to BI, but this allows you to consume and potentially get access to any DB workbook. Now, when you're a DB consumer, you automatically inherit BI consumer. So in that scenario, if a user wants to basically be a DB consumer and look at classic dashboards, you do not need to give the user both. The system always looks to what the highest level permissions you have within the system. And I'll keep talking about that a little bit. Moving up a little bit, we have the content authors. Again, we have one for BI, and then we have the one for DB. And you can kind of see the arrows and how it inherits. So DB content author, right? That means you can develop workbooks, create data sets, create connections, potentially within the platform. Very powerful role, DB content author, and it inherits everything below it. So again, if you're a DB content author, you do not need to give users those lower level application roles. DB content author includes all of them, rolls up to that one. On the kind of the far right, we have the data model author. That's for getting into the semantic modeler, right? To get access to the semantic modeler, it's kind of like a standalone role. And then, of course, we have the BI service administrator that inherits everything. So, for example, if you're a BI service administrator, you never need another access, right? You don't ever have to give someone else a lower level access because BI service administrator inherits all of them. All right. So with that knowledge, let's go kind of back to the users and permissions and kind of see how they work in action. So I'm going to come back here. We'll go to console, back to roles and permissions. Now let's talk about users and groups for a second. You don't add users to OAC, meaning you don't come into OAC and say, I'm going to create a new user. All users are coming from OCI or Oracle Cloud Infrastructure's identity provider, right? So users are really added at a much higher level with an OCI, and they flow into the platform. So for example, if I click users, just because I see a user's name here doesn't mean they have access to OAC. And I get that from a lot of people. They're like, well, their name is here. Nope. It just means they are in the tenancy identity provider and that they are available to be added as a user to your OAC platform. And of course, at any time, I can go down to, let's go see if I can find my name. There we go. So I'm on a couple different teams here, right? A couple different groups here, but that's where the users are coming from. They're coming from a higher level in OCI. Now, groups, exact same thing. Groups are coming from our identity provider. You don't add groups directly within OAC. So there's nothing you need to do as a user or an administrator, right? When you spin up an Oracle Analytics Cloud instance, the users and groups will flow into it directly. Now, when you have users and groups, what are you doing with them? Well, you're adding them to application roles, right? So application roles, I'm going to come over here. I'm going to limit just a few of them. Now, these are, so you can see the lock there, right? These are the system ones. You can't edit them. These are the ones that we just went over. Data model author, BI service administrator, content author. And of course, there's the two DV ones. There we go. So DV consumer, DV content author. Now, as a starting point for smaller configurations, you might just be able to use those directly, meaning you might have some power users that are developers. You throw them all into the DV content author role, right? So we have lots of users there. You might on the DV, you might have consumers and you drop them all into your DV consumers. But what about when you have consumers that are only in one, let's call it department or division of your company, maybe HR and finance. And all of a sudden you have consumers that are in each group, but they're looking at different folders. So with that type of setup, you might create what's called custom application roles. Now, a custom application role can be from one system application role. It can be from another custom application role. It can include extra permissions. So it can kind of host a lot of different other things. But I want to step out of here for 1 second because I want to show you on the front end what is really happening, right? And you want to focus on users and application roles. If I come into this workbook, right? Let's say I'm going to edit it really quick. And I'm going to go and inspect it from right here. Oh, because this one is not in shared. Let's come back here. I'm just going to go to home. I'll come into a data set, actually one of the ones I'm using for this webinar today. When we go over our APIs. Now look at access, right? You're only allowed, you don't see how there's no groups there, right? There's only users and roles. Now roles will consist of custom application roles and system roles. And then of course, users are one-off and users. And of course, all will just list everything within here. Now, because when you secure an object only to users and roles, where does that leave groups? That leaves groups. You want to use groups when you're assigning lots of people to the roles, right? That's where that's most important. And we strongly advise you to do that. If you have only a few members in your OAC instance, you can probably get away with just using users at all times. But when you have large amounts of people, you are going to want to utilize the groups. It's going to make it easier for you to manage, and you will assign a group to a system application role or a custom one. So let's go through here and actually build a few of them out. So let's go to console, roles and permissions. Let's go to create application role. Now we'll just call this HR generalist. And what do you want to start with? Well, you can start with none and slowly add on things to it. You can choose from an existing application role. Again, that can be system or custom, or we can start choosing very specific permissions, right? So what I want to do is, let's say this first role, they're consumers, but they're consumers that need one or two features that a content author can do, right? So I can choose from an existing application role, and I'm going to say these are my DV consumers. So I basically have an HR generalist role that I've just created. We'll let that create quickly. Okay, let's go find that. So we have HR generalists. No users have been added to it yet, right? No groups have been added to it. It does inherit one of the other groups that we've already added to it. And I'm not going to get into IDCS application roles. That is another way using our identity service. That IDCS stands for Identity Cloud Service for Oracle. And there is another way to add users to some of these system roles when getting started for fast tracking, but we're not really going to get into that today. But let's say, for example, this HR generalist, which is based off of a DB consumer application role, you want to add some permissions. See right here, the role is based from the DB consumer. So right now they're going to get all permissions from a DB consumer. And maybe we want to have them export workbooks. Maybe we want to look at some of the other permissions here. As you can see here, they're kind of broken down from catalog to administration, right? And we're adding more and more. They're getting more granular. So for example, maybe I want them to be able to create a data flow. I can add that to this custom application role, right? So these users that I drop in here, and when we go to members, right, we can put me. Oh, add users. That was the other one was to search within existing users. So now in this custom application role, right? It's called HR Generalist. I'm a user in there. We know I'm basically a DB consumer with a few more permissions right there. So it's a very specialized group. Now, other times you might have finance consumers and HR consumers, right? And on those cases, all you would do, you would just create two different application roles called HR consumers and finance consumers. And that's how you would basically lock down the folders. And that's really when you start coming into, let's go to catalog. And let's say I go to shared folders and I want to, let's do this. And I want to inspect here, access, and I could say, where's my HR generalist? And now I can say maybe these are all my HR objects. Well, I can give them access to that folder. Same thing if you had a finance one, right? So pretty easy. But again, the things to just be really aware of when the system logs you in, it understands what your highest role is, right? So from a functionality of what you can do, you do not need to layer on lots of things. So if you're added to one special application role that gives you permissions to do one maybe higher level thing versus your base application role that were copied over, well, that's going to be through the entire platform. The other reason why, again, application roles or custom application roles are important is for just security to folders and objects, right? It's less about functionality and it's a lot more just dividing people into what they can see and what they can't see from a full catalog aspect. Now, one last thing I want to do is create a bunch of super users, but not obviously admins are built-in super users, but I want to do DV content super users, right? I want to copy from an existing one. I want to take the DV content author. Nope, me. There we go. And now maybe this new DV content author of super users, I want to say, let's add some permissions. And maybe I want maybe I only have two people in this group, but I want them to manage the LLMs. All right. The administrator can kind of stay out of that one. And that's what you can do. So you can see a lot of the other ones that are already inherited by that, right? These are already inherited. And now you can basically say, oh, now they can do an administrative feature. So that is the other thing. You don't pare down typically, right? If you're going to build up a user, you take the lower level system application role or another custom application role, and then you add permissions to it versus like trying to take an administrator and taking features away, right? You wouldn't go that route. You really want to build up from lower level to give lower level users a few fine-grained permissions to do something technically that most users at that level wouldn't do. So hopefully that gives you just kind of a couple different use cases, a couple different reasons of why we do it, how we do it. And again, I can't stress enough, if you have over 20, 30 users in your instance, you're going to want to utilize these groups and have these identity groups flow cleanly into your application roles so you're not dealing with ones and twos of users out there. Now, there's always reasons why you need to add a single user, maybe to one workbook or one folder. That's always going to happen. But still, by using groups, you're going to really help yourself and not have to manage as much from a user standpoint within here. All right, so let's back out of here one. We're going to spend a second on sessions and query logs. Now, anyone that's been in OAC long enough, they remember this from the classic side, right? This was how you would get to all of your queries, right? This is really your query generation center of how it takes the logical SQL and creates it to physical SQL and sends it down to your data sources, when it happened, all of the stats behind it, right? But when you set up usage tracking, which we're going to be talking about later, almost all this data is captured in a database for you that is then stored and queryable, and it's much more useful than coming in here. But there still are some good reasons to come in here, and I'm going to want to talk about them for a minute. One, it allows you to know who's in the instance, right? You can come in here, see who's logged in right now. You can cancel running requests. Cancel running requests, think of it like a runaway query. Now, we already know OAC has some timers in there that are going to prevent a query from running too long. But if you know you have a query that's just a poorly written query and it just started and it's kind of pulling down the database or something, a OAC administrator can come in here and cancel that query directly from this panel. Again, you can have access to kind of view the logs and the diagnostics within here, but that a lot of that is, again, going to be stored if you set up usage tracking. And there's not really many good reasons not to. I would not want to administer OAC without usage tracking. I'll tell you how you can do it pretty easily a little bit later in this session. But that's really some of the main reasons why you would come into sessions and query logs still. Now, a lot of this data of the queries being fired, if I come back to let's go home, go back to my administration, load this up. Now, I'm just going to go in here to one of my workbooks that will be hide the. All right, so I think I've spoken to all of you. All of you should be aware of this developer option. I've spoken about it in a prior session. This developer option is which you turn on in your profile, and you basically say advanced, enable developer options. You turn that on. Within a workbook, you get this developer tab. And this developer tab has a lot of different features within here. But the reason I'm bringing it up now is because when you want to refresh your different visuals within there, all this information, this summary, the times, was the query hitting cache, number of rows from the database, the logical SQL, all this. You saw all this a second ago in that other session and log screen. Again, all of this can be captured by the usage tracking setup if you decide to do it. So this is just another way where you're seeing this manifest itself on the front end for the users, because obviously most people are not going to be administrators. So each user on a workbook by workbook level and visualization by visualization level, they can come here and get some of that information. But it makes it much more useful, again, when it's all in a couple tables within the database and queryable. So let's close that. All right. Let's talk a minute about snapshots. As Uma stated earlier, snapshots are there for two main purposes: for backing up all of your artifacts within your OAC instance and for migrations, right? Those are at the highest level, that's what they're suited to do. They are intended to be your catch-all for all of the artifacts. Now, again, you're either creating a snapshot or you're restoring one, meaning you're taking an existing snapshot and you're pushing it back onto the OAC server. And of course, depending on what options you've selected, that will trigger what's going to happen. But let's talk through this for a minute. Let's say I want to create a snapshot. You say create snapshot, you give it, a name. This is Pete's latest version. Now from content, a lot of the times, especially from a DR perspective, you want to have everything. But from a migration perspective, you might not need everything, right? And this is where you can actually remove some of the objects within here, right? So if you're migrating from dev to test or test to prod, you can take away some of these artifacts in the system before you push them into the higher level. Like, right, maybe I don't care about users, folders, and personalizations, right, in a lower level environment when I get to bring this up to a higher level environment. So you have the ability to tailor your snapshot to your exacting needs. And again, mostly for migrations. If you're doing DR, you're going to want to do everything, right? And once you say create, it will then take a minute, depending on the size. You can see this is a pretty decent size OAC instance. We're up to about a gig now. But as the size, based on the size, it will take a few minutes to create this file. You can store up, you can think of this as a holding area for up to 40 different snapshots within the instance, but you can also store these in object storage, right? To get them out of the OAC instance. Now, one of the features with this can all be automated. The taking of a snapshot, the restoring of a snapshot can actually be done from a development standpoint using APIs. And we're going to talk about that in a little bit. But also, let's say I have, so here's a last restore. You can see it was the last restored. If I come here and I say, of course, you can delete these and export these. It will create a tangible file, like I said, that you can store in object storage or on your local desktop. But let's say you wanted to restore an existing one, because maybe something happened, someone made a lot of changes, and right before they did, you took a snapshot. Again, another great reason to take a snapshot right before you're embarking on maybe a lot of changes within there. Take the snapshot, and after that, you're like, no, I want to bring back the old one. You can say restore. You give it a reason, right? That's kind of tracked there so we know. And then once again, you have a few different options. Do you want to replace what's in the snapshot? Meaning if it finds the exact item in the new feature, in the new wherever it's going, it will replace it. Do you want to replace everything? Or custom? And that custom's, of course, going to be based on what the original snapshot was and what options the user selected in there to include. So pretty straightforward. And this has been the way of migrating OAC and other legacy environments for years within here. So I think that's about it for snapshots. I'm going to go next to extensions. I want to really make sure everyone knows about extensions. Extensions are nothing but plugins, right? They are, most of the time, they are visualizations that don't come standard with the platform. That's it. These are all visualizations that are available to download on a link we have here under Oracle Developers. Now, another thing, I'm going to be going through a few other URLs and web pages like documentation in a few minutes. We are going to send you all these. So anyone attending today is going to get a file containing all these URLs. So you don't need to try to capture them now. And also, we're going to post these on the YouTube channel once this gets out there. So all these links will be easily available to you. We try to consolidate all of them for you. But if I come into data visualization extensions, you can check them all out, right? They're free to download. And it's really easy. I'm going to show you how to do one really quick. I'm going to do this new menu bar, which again is a nice way of creating more complex menus directly in your charts to do other actions within there based on JSON. So all you do is download it. Once you download it, it is going to basically give you a little extract file. You're going to get a zip file. And once you have a zip file from the download, you come to your extensions page right here and see this upload extension. I can just select it, or I can drop it right there. And there is I already did this earlier before this, that menu bar extension. All I have to do is that. And it's going to get one more message saying, hey, you got to refresh it. That extension has now been added to my entire OAC instance. Now, where do you see it? Well, you see it on the workbooks, right? Because it's a new visualization type. So let's go in here. Let's create a workbook. And while this is loading, of course, you can delete visualizations if you want. We'll use that same file I was earlier. Close that. We're going to come over to our visualizations panel. And all you got to do is go down to the bottom. There you are. They will automatically appear under custom visualizations, right? As you can see, in this instance, we have most of them in here, so we're familiar with them and we know how to use them. This little menu bar, that's the one I just created, right? It's not configured. Basically, it's looking for a little bit of JSON. And again, all this is actually on the download page. I'm just going to put a little JSON in there. And look at these buttons. Maybe you need a few of them. Obviously the colors. I can actually go into the JSON really quickly, but this is the example that comes with the download, right? Very basic JSON structure. And this is just, again, one of many of the available downloads in there. So a lot of different cool features out there. I want everyone to be aware of it. You now saw how you implement it. And again, they're going to populate here for everyone that has that's DB content author or higher. All right, so I definitely like that one. That one's pretty cool within here. Switch back. So that's extensions. Not a lot else to cover there. Sorry, let's go back to console. Let's go to generative AI. I went over, we have 2 webinars. The previous ones, they're on demand, one based on just machine learning and one based on AI. I talk a bit about that, so I'm not going to talk about that today. Maps. Maps are a huge part of this platform. It comes pre-installed or preloaded with many maps. If you're using maps, you've probably seen all the ones that come available. A lot of the overall map backgrounds, you can add your own here, whether you realize that or not. There's a couple different types. And actually, you can create your own image background. Now, we don't have time to do that today. Literally, you can upload an image. You can basically make hotspots on it that sync to your data. So you make it completely interactive like a map. We're going to do that in our next and our last installment of this series on the unlocking consumer controls. So I'm going to go all over how to upload an image, draw it out, and make it like an interactive object on your dashboards. So definitely come back for that one. A lot of the data layers. Well, let's first look at the system. So system map layers, these are the ones that we've uploaded, right? That come with the platform. Custom, there's tons of them. And why are there so many in this? Because all you need is what's called a GeoJSON file, right? A lot of mapping software actually can produce them these days. Other ones you can get, other open source ones, and all you need to do is have a GeoJSON file, add it right here, give it some attributes, and then users can start using it. Same thing with reference layers, right? You can see some ones here that we've created. But yeah, maps, again, they're getting stronger in this tool every day. There's so many more things we can do with them. And a lot of it starts with the backgrounds and the map layers. And as an administrator, you have a lot of control over them. And of course, being able to add your own. Okay, so I'm going to come back to advanced system settings. Those are kind of more individualized little config features that we're going to talk about. I do want to talk about layouts and themes. Now, layouts and themes is a newer option, and that allows for consistency across your organization. All right, layouts are literally a layout, right? It says like, hey, developers, when you're starting to build new dashboards for our department, our division, your organization, try to use this template, right? As you can see, a fewer read only. You can, of course, disable them here if you don't want to use them. Just to give you an example, we have one that was created in this instance. But where do you see these? Once again, if I create a workbook, it's pretty much the first thing you're going to see. Right there. Select a layout. And that's where they are. So the administrator can create defined, consistent layouts for your organization. And on the flip side to that, are themes, right? This is the ability to create your corporate colors, right? For years, you had to do it on a workbook by workbook level. Now you can do it for your organization, have multiple different ones, and themes are right up here. This is where you can select which theme for your users. So again, great for consistency. All right, let's go back out of here. Now, some of these other ones are like one-time setups, like mail settings. If you wanted to email, that's the one-time setup. Virus scanner, remote data connectivity. That's if you need to connect to something where you don't have network access to. Safe domains allows you, if anyone's going to link to images or objects in other web pages, your administrator has to give you access to hit that web page or URL, which again kind of safeguards the platform from unauthorized URLs. And advanced settings, just a few I want to talk about in here. So a lot of these are still dedicated to Classic, right? So a lot of these are really for Classic, but I'm going to jump down to performance and capabilities. So for anyone using OAC for a while, right, you might have been playing with the auto insights or maybe the cache. See, these are the areas where you can turn it on or off for the entire instance, where we already know you have to turn these on per object in the front end, but you can turn it off for the entire instance here. And these are the types of features that are going to be available within this advanced settings. So again, you don't want caching, you don't want brushing enabled, you can turn them off here for the entire instance. Otherwise, you customize them on object by object. And one other one, for any of those Oracle database users out there that write functions and want to utilize functions they built in the database, you need to be aware of this evaluate function, right? This is a function in a calculation that allows you, if you're using an Oracle database, to call or reference a function inside the database. And of course, you can, if that function requires parameters, this function, this evaluate function, allows you to pass in parameters when you're referencing your database function. By default, this is off. So 0 is off, 1 is for administrators, 2 is for all developers. I love that feature. I write a lot of database functions. And again, it also allows you to keep it more in the database versus writing them if they're very complex in OAC, depending on what you're more comfortable with. So I love showing users about that. Again, I advise every administrator to quickly go through here and take a look at this. Preview is where sometimes we put some new kind of beta ones. They're typically turned off by default. So every new release, we sometimes will have preview. Previews might stay on for a few releases, but you can come here, you can turn them on, you can turn them off. Maybe you don't feel comfortable giving them to your production users, so maybe you want to test them out in your test or dev environments. And that's what this are. Eventually, they all typically go, you want to think of it like GA, they'll come off a preview and then will just be part of the platform. But just want to make you aware of these preview options. And usage tracking. Now, one of the links that we're going to send you is a blog on how to set it up, right? So I'm not going to really go through it. It's actually pretty easy. The main requirement is you, of course, need enterprise analytics because it needs to go through the semantic model or the client admin tool, and you need an Oracle database. One thing, if you don't have an Oracle database, always consider spinning up an always free autonomous 23 AI database that can house all of your tracking data. I'm not going to go through all these, but essentially it's creating 3 different tables for you that you can use, and that's all the data that is captured by it. So at a high level, if let's close some of these, we don't need our extensions. We're sending you this documentation on the usage tracking, and there's got to be, I don't know, 20, 30 fields that it delivers. The type of query, the user, how long it took, the SQL string, was it a cache hit? You know, the user, the object that it was run from, was it a filter? Was it a workbook? Was it an analysis? And all of that is captured for you automatically once you set this up. It's really then what you do with it is what I want to show, spend a minute to show on here. So I'm going to go back home. I'm going to go back to DB administration. And I'm going to show you what you can do with some of that data. Right? So these are a few dashboards I've built up. And again, this just has, I don't know, a set time, maybe from a month ago. But this is one of those dashboards when you want to use relative time, like last week, last month, it's ideal, right? So if you really want to get a gauge, how often is your platform being used? What time of the day is it being used? Days of the week? What type of objects, right? So these are top analysis, top workbooks, top objects. I think a lot of users, that are trying to trend away from classic to DV, well, they can see right here. Well, look at my analysis count versus my DB count. Clearly, most users are using DB workbooks in here versus analysis. And that can actually help you monitor, like, oh, who's still using what? And of course, I've masked the users' names, but you can also see who your top users are. And then you can keep digging in and drilling in more and more here. I'm just going to show you a few more. Okay, so this is like workbook oversight, similar to before. And of course, you could add your own filters, like which workbooks, and you can analyze workbooks over like especially which workbooks aren't people using. Maybe you ask why and retire them. And that's why I would never want to administer one of these instances without having usage tracking set up, because I have no visibility otherwise to see who's using what, how often they're using it, so on. Because especially for the most heavily used ones, if you know that, then you might want to say, what else can we do to improve it even more, right? And last one, daily trends. Again, this is just a very small subset of the data available to you, but what if you want to look at like rows or distinct users per day, right? Queries run per day. And what if you could break this down to hour after this if you want, because it's all that granular. So there's just so much information you can do with the usage tracking data. Like I said, it's part of the service. You need an Oracle database. That's really one of the only requirements, that and Enterprise Edition. All right, next is logging. Now, logging is the flip side, because if usage tracking tracks all the queries, logging tracks other diagnostic and compliance type objects. Like, for example, someone created a folder, someone created a new data set, someone altered a data set, someone added a new, like added security or changed security or permissions to a data set. Now, you might want all of those from a compliance thing, like why did you add this user to this? Or why are you creating a new data set? We have this one over here. So OCI logging, again, we're going to send you the directions or the URL, how to set it up. You can have it basically, it happens on OCI that the logging can be completely enabled. And then there's a few steps if you want to get it all inserted into a database or something like that that you can pull from in real time, which is the way I have it set up here. So for logging, there are two different types of logs. There's audit and diagnostic, right? And this is I think, I don't know, a 5-minute clip of different objects or logging activities that were emitted in here. There we go. So I got both my lines. I basically have I only have a few audit, mostly diagnostic. It can start breaking them down into different categories per, right? Starts looking at time of day when they were happening. But to really get into it, let's look at some of the data you can get there. So this is I think this screen makes a little bit more sense. Like, you can do a timeline and start breaking it down between diagnostic and audit, then between users, right? So for example, maybe I just want to focus on some of the audit because right now they're a little more interesting to me. Let me filter. All right, so what's happening here? From user 1, again, I'm just masking the users' names. Oh, they created a data set called customers. They created a data set called sales. Let's find another one. They created a folder screenshots was created. And I'm actually going to show them all. And let's just bring that up for a minute. Properties updated, definition updated, created data sets, updated data sets. So again, a ton of great information that's super useful. And these are getting, again, emitted as soon as you set up the logging. All these get captured. And again, you can send it to a database to start querying on it in real time. And then you have a real good handle on what is happening with logging and usage tracking set up. There's not much that is going to get by you on what happened. Or of course, you can always go back and kind of, someone said something happened last week. Can you go take a look? Setting up a few little workbooks like that as an administrator is one of the best things you can do. All right. So, and we're almost out of time and we're really at the last option here that I wanted to cover today, and that's REST. So when we're talking about REST, right, these REST calls can be made from wherever. Any platform that can make a REST call, you can have these invoked for different developer-centric options of the platform. Now, the first one is on an OCI standpoint, right? It's really more about the entire instance of OAC versus objects within an instance. Some of the more popular ones here, of course, Stop Analytics instance. Like, maybe you want to use your usage tracking and you see no one's using it on the weekends. Well, maybe you set it up. Maybe you have a tool make an automatic call so you don't have to manually do it. Maybe Friday night, late night, you have a system that makes this REST call to stop the analytics instance, and Monday morning, you turn it on. Well, that's where the start and stop is. Maybe you want to remember I talked earlier about the DR. You can actually take a snapshot and then restore a snapshot through these REST APIs. And here's just a few more of them on the OCI level. You can create vanity URLs. You can, of course, scale your instance. If you know based on usage tracking that Fridays are heavy usage days, maybe you scale up the instance a couple more OCPUs and then have another call at the end of the day to scale it down, right? That's what these are used for. They're used to allow administrators a little bit more control and a little more automation. And then within OAC, you have a lot more. I'm just going to actually pull up the full list here. So from a catalog standpoint, again, moving items. You could systematically move items from even different environments, maybe from a test to a prod, right? Through these APIs. You want create connections, create data flows, right? Because your connection and test might be to a test environment. Maybe you want to programmatically migrate a snapshot from test to prod, and then immediately update the connections from test to prod, right? All can be done through these APIs, whether it's getting histories on data flows or refresh histories on data sets, right? One of the big questions I've got for years is, hey, can I run an OAC data flow outside of OAC? And the answer is yes. You can run a data flow with the right REST call and the right permissions outside of OAC. Very powerful to be able to do that, because maybe you integrate it into another platform that you need, because you need that data, because maybe that data flow is writing results down to the database. So as you can see, we have a few more system ones, some snapshot ones that we talked about, system settings, stuff like that. We have the full, again, these links are going to be provided to you. These are all the ones for OAC, within OAC. These are all going to be the ones that are more at an OCI level, taking care of the instance. And I know we're pretty much at time, and that is everything I wanted to cover today. So with that, I want to say thank you to everyone who attended. And as always, I hope this was a good use of your time. And I want to say a big thank you to Uma, Joey, and the entire team that helped put these.
Now, a couple of things to remember. We discussed an overview or a refresher of the Oracle Analytics Cloud platform and how it provides you self-service, governed, and augmented analytics. This may have been a refresher for some of you, or is a good overview for those who are new. We also explored some core elements of administration in OAC. We went through the OAC console. We looked at the different user management and permissions. We covered usage tracking. We looked at the different logging options and all of the different REST API support. Now we're going to put a quick poll up on the screen again to see how you felt about today's session. So on a scale of 1 to 10, how likely are you to recommend this webinar to others, where 10 is the most likely? And then if you'd like to learn more beyond just these Day 1 and Beyond sessions, we have many different resources available to you. We have certifications, labs, tutorials, documentation, best practices, and many different on-demand videos for you to look at as well. And beyond those resources, if you enjoyed this session and would like us to conduct personalized training sessions for your organization, you can contact us at our personal training email. They're on the slide, and we will reach out to you. If you want us to conduct just hands-on labs, we have our newly designed Quick Shot Live Labs program for more hands-on experience or learning towards a particular topic. And then we also have Code Innovate, which will help you develop your own solution based off of your use case. And just please remember that personal training is going to be an investment we make in our customers to help you grow and develop their OCI skills at no extra cost to you. And this is just a look at the other sessions that we have coming up. We have several different Day 1 and Beyond series that we do every month. We have the Core series, the Analytics Cloud series, which is happening now. We have one more session left in August. There's the Hands-On series, the Cloud Security series, the Did You Know series, and then a upcoming Cloud Native Launchpad. So please tune in for all of these. And our next session, as mentioned, will be OAC for Consumers on August 4th, and we hope to see you there. And I hope you enjoyed today's session and hope you have a great rest of your day. Thanks, everyone.